How's everybody doing? All right, I know it's like after lunch, like, oh, dang. So I'm gonna try to make this fun, energizing, so you're not just sitting there thinking, I'm gonna put my head down and hope I learn it through osmosis. So we're going to avoid that. So we're gonna talk about maximizing your content creation. And you're gonna see a little bit of humor, excitement, and education along the way. If the slide will move, please. All right, while this is working itself out, why you want to create content? Because it comes onto a quote. Remember that guy that gave up? Neither does anyone else. When it comes to your content creation, you have to be consistent, because one of the things that tends to happen is we do one post and suddenly we think they're all going to come. Who's ever thought that? And then what happened? Nothing. So what do you have to do? You have to keep going. That's one of the important things when it comes down to creating your content. You cannot stop. You have to keep going. And no matter what, it comes down to 100% actions required. You cannot half any of it. It's important. And for those of you who didn't see, I said half. So it's important not to do that. You have to give everything you have to show up, because when you show up, people recognize it. That is critical. So when comes down to content creation, there's 3 pillars. You need to get people to think, you need to get them to feel, and ultimately, you need to get them to do. Why? How many of you have bought a car or ridden a car? Or just looked at it and thought, yeah. But when you decide to buy a car, what do? You go online these days and think, I think I'm going to buy a car. And then you do your research, you're thinking about it. Okay, I need 2 seats of just me. Oh, I have a family, I might need a minivan, or I need to have an SUV, or you think about all the stuff that you need for it. But then what happens next? You sit in the car. So what do? You're in it, you're like, yeah, this feels good. Oh, this is awesome. And then you take it for a test drive. You kind of drive like this if you're the single guy like me. Or you're like this if you're the family, because you don't want to get that evil eye. Like, what are you doing? And that's important, because then you move to doing, which is buying the car. These are the phases people go through when they're buying. And when it comes to your content, you want to get them to move through those same phases. So when it comes to creating a foundation, you always want to start with the end in mind. And when it comes to that, you have to think about who is your ideal client. And why is that? How many of you have a best friend? Okay, some of you, we have to work on that. Instead of just being acquaintances, you're like, I have 5,000 friends, but I don't know a damn thing about any of them. We need to move beyond that. Because when it comes to your best friend, you need to know them like that. When you think of your best friend, do you know what they like? Their favorite color, their favorite food? Do you know all those things? Okay, one person knows their best friend. But this is what we have to do. Because when it comes to our ideal client, the more we know about them, the easier it is for our content to relate to them. Because when they see, they're like, wow, I feel like you're speaking directly to me. When you've seen an ad online or a piece of content, did you ever feel like that person was speaking to you? Did you ever feel that? It happens. But when you don't do that, I want you to picture yourself in a situation. How many of you have taken a flight someplace and you weren't with somebody, and then there's that awkward moment and you think to yourself, oh, please don't let that person be weird and creepy that's going to sit next to me? This is what happens in business when you don't identify your ideal client. Because when you get that person you don't want, what happens when they call? You're like, oh, hell no, I don't want to answer that phone. We need to keep track of that, so we make sure we get excited about it. We can look forward to every time they're calling. We want to do business with them, and they stay with us longer. And it begins with our content. So some of the questions that you need to ask yourself when it comes to your content and identifying your ideal clients: why should they buy from you? It doesn't matter what industry we're in, what we do, there's more than just us out there. So we have to put out content that's going to make them say, you know what, I like you. I want to do business with you versus the other person. That's important. But it's not as important as, why should they buy from you again? In business, no matter what you see and hear out there, there's only 3 ways you're going to grow your business. 1, that's to get more customers. 2, to get them to buy from you more often. And 3, to increase the average order size. That's it. The second 2 involve them coming back, which means you have to have the second date. So let's face it, if you're just going nothing but first dates, do you ever think you're going to get any further in life? Probably not. So this is why in business we must make sure we are putting out content that's going to help us move forward in that buying process. Content creation is going to come down into 2 main buckets. The first one is your traditional sense of content creation, but the other is life documentation. We want to make this as easy as possible for you, because if you're going to have to do something, do you want to feel like, oh, this is a lot of work, I don't want to do that? No, you want it to be fun. Because how many of you think that you're living exciting lives? Okay, we have a handful. The rest, there's a 12-step program on living exciting lives. But when it comes to content creation, this is creating content specifically for the purpose of moving people forward in the buying process. And yes, that is my dog, Luna, who obviously she's not here, because if she was, I promise you, she would have gone to every single table and said hi to everyone. But what do you talk about when it comes to content creation? Well, you want to educate, you want to entertain, you want to inform, and ultimately get people to act. So education. This is helping people understand about your industry, what people should know. So for example, let's say in real estate, you want to educate people on what the buying process is. Or let's say that you had a clothing store. You want to educate people on what type of clothing items to buy for certain times of the year. Or let's say you have a restaurant. You want to talk about what type of foods you want to have for certain occasions. The list goes on and on. You want to help them understand how to buy from you. Entertainment, it should be pretty obvious. You want to get people to have fun. How many of you go on to any social media network with the sole intention of being sold to? That's right, no one. We go there to connect and be entertained. We see people through other lenses, like, oh wow, they're doing something fun. I want to participate in it. It's the reason why we watch movies and TV and so forth. We go for entertainment. So you want to be able to let people into your world. Let them have a little bit of fun through your eyes. And you can do that within your business. And you want to inform them. Yes, that is a sign. You want to let them know, here is what's going on in your business. And it's important, because if people don't know what it is that you do specifically, how can they buy from you? It's like, well, they put out great content, but I don't know what they do. This is where informing comes into place. And ultimately, you have to create content that gets people to act. Because have you ever bought something if no one asked you to? Anyone? No, it doesn't work. You have to ask someone. If I wanted to get a handshake from Christine sitting up here in front, I would have to ask, like, Christine, would you shake my hand? If I didn't ask, if I just kind of did like this and just gave that sad look, she'd probably look like, what the is wrong? And so we have to make sure we ask for what we want. The other is life documentation. We all live, whatever you want to call it, lives. And we want to document it. Each and every one of us carries a phone around with us. We don't need a camera crew to follow us around 24/7, taking pictures and everything else. No matter what people might see out there, you don't need it. You simply need to be present and say, I'm gonna take pictures of that. Not just for reminder purposes, so you can look back down the road, but you want to be able to share that moment because people want to connect. They want to buy from people they feel they have something in common with. How many of you have connected with a business for that sole purpose because you had something in common with them? Just by a show of hands? That's what we do. And that is me skydiving from over 14,000 feet in Fiji. Yeah, it's an incredible view. I'm kind of a thrill seeker, so it kind of works. But what do you document? Your daily activities. And no matter how much you might think, but my life is kind of boring. Trust me, no matter what you're doing, someone's going to find excitement with it or some way of connecting with it. Look at how many people have been living and working from home for over the past year. They haven't gone out and done much of anything. So anything that is outside of what they've been doing is helpful. They go, wow, that looks great. And then they want to know more. They start consuming more of your content. They want to keep going deeper and deeper with you. The foods you eat, because we all connect over food. That's another way people can build a bond, like, oh, you like this too? Me too. And before you know it, you're having a conversation. Travels, where you're going to. Because sometimes for people, I go, I wanted to go there, but I haven't. Another conversational point. The books you read, it's the same thing. And whatever else goes on in your life. Because we're all different. We all have different interests. So let people in. But ultimately, it comes down to, well, I don't know exactly, well, what's the next step? I have ideas of what I want to do, but what's that? Take pictures. You could take screenshots. You can pull out your phone, take pictures of what's going on. It's one of the simplest things to do. Does this mean that you have to be a professional photographer like George and have the fancy camera equipment? No, just use your phone. The majority of images you see out there are just going to be regular pictures people are taking. That's all you need to do. Videos. Do you sense a theme here? Video, and video. I want you to put it into 3 blocks. 15-second videos, 30-second videos, and 60-second videos. And we're going to come back to this, of why, but I want you to think about this seed for a moment. When it comes to educational content, these are some of the questions that you want to begin answering for yourself. What do you do? Because you have to educate people on that. Because they don't know you from anybody else. It's no different than if you walked up to someone in a bar, you're like, hi. And then it's like, so now what? You want them to understand. And that's where it begins. Explain to them, what is it that you do? But more importantly, how do you do it? Because often, the way you do something might be the distinguishing factor between you and someone else. And that's going to make the difference. But not only that, showcasing your results. People like to buy results. They like to buy the vision of results. When you see, let's say as an example, weight loss commercials, what do you see on them? Do you see people happy? Like, I did this. They don't really show the before version very often. Like, this person did all these things and ta-da, they're in shape. They're selling the results. It's the same thing when you see, let's say, fast food commercials. You don't see the person standing in line like, yeah, I don't know what I want. You see the fancy burger there that you're never getting because it doesn't look like that ever. Really, it does. I've been to places I've never seen it look like the commercial. They're selling the result because you want to buy the outcome. Also, educate people on what's happening now in your industry because people need to be kept up to date. For informational, this gets into like, well, what do you do, but how is it relevant to them? If you're explaining, here's our 5-step process, that's informational. But also what makes you different. You want to let them know that here's our proprietary process. It's a more informational, procedural way that you're putting things together. And ultimately, you want to make sure that you're overcoming objections with your content. And here's why it's important. When you're making sales calls, how many times have you gotten an objection to, or was it like every sales call you made like, yep, let's do it? Or did you have to overcome a few obstacles? the more objections you overcome up front, the easier it is to get people to say yes later. So it's just answering those questions. So a simple exercise for you to do is just to think back to all your sales calls and then write a list of what are the objections and then answer them. And then you can start incorporating those into your pieces of content that you're creating. But there's a secret ingredient. Who likes secrets? No one likes secrets, so I guess I can be done now. Okay, we have a couple people, but the secret ingredient are stories. We each have them, and we need to use them, because this is what's really going to connect us with our audience. How many of you have heard of the Avengers or seen the movie? Yeah, exactly, all the different ones. But before this movie came out, by a show of hands, how many of you had ever heard of any of those characters depicted in it? Yeah, exactly. What they did was they used the power of stories to take characters that had been around for decades, that only a small group of people that were comic book fans knew. So think about it. They took these stories and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar empire. No matter what level business is in, we all connect through stories. That's the power of it. Does it mean that you're going to have a story you're going to turn into a billion-dollar empire? Who knows? But unless you start sharing your stories, you're still going to be at the starting line. So when it comes to them, because we all have them, you want to make a list. And you want to be unfiltered. I had to get it in there somehow. Of your stories. Spend some time, just make a list of them. Think about all the different things you did in life, like, oh yeah, and don't stop. Just like, oh yeah, there's a one time I did this and this. Just make out a bulleted list, nothing that's complicated. Because you're going to use those, because you're going to combine it with everything else, because we all have them. It doesn't matter where we are, where we're from, because that's what's going to make each of us different. To have different experiences in life. No matter if you grew up in the same town as somebody, you're going to have different experiences. But wait, there's more. News and events. How many of you pay attention to what's going on in the world around you? There's a simple tool that you can use. It's called Google Alerts. And what I want you to do with it is create alerts for things related to your industry. Because then you're going to create content around that. Because no matter what happens, is people are talking about those things. Look like, oh, wow, this is fascinating. But use things that are relevant to your business. Just because something is a trending topic, you shouldn't necessarily talk about it, because that can open up a whole can of worms that you don't want to open. But when it's something that's relevant with what's going on, it's like, oh, well, this is fascinating. So I'm going to use an example. Let's just say that someone's in the mortgage industry, and with everything happening with forbearance and people delaying paying on their mortgage, or looking at evictions. You can use that if you're in the real estate industry, of talking about what are some of the things that you can do to potentially help them. And it's relevant. If you had nothing to do with that industry, let's say that you made soaps, that would be a very bad idea, because people are wondering, what the heck? And then they stop listening to you. So make sure your content is relevant to the topic at hand. So now what do? You know that you need to create content based on education, information, entertaining, and getting people to act. You know that you need to use these types of videos, but what do? You need to put it in action. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So first, you have Facebook and Instagram stories. How many of you used stories before? So with this, you know that you can be able to put the same content by sharing a story from Instagram to Facebook, or you know how easy that is? So you can create that piece of content once, and you can get it onto both platforms. This is why I want you to be thinking about what are the types of things you can put into little buckets. So that's the first thing. The second thing with content are 30-second videos. And this comes down to Google My Business. How many of you have like a brick and mortar business or a physical location? How many of you have a Google My Business profile set up? How many of you have it verified? Okay, if you don't have it verified, get it verified. But this is something that a lot of businesses don't do. You can post 30-second videos to your Google My Business profile. And what happens when people are going online, when they say, let's see, I'm searching for a business in my area. If they don't call right away, they'll look and see, oh, what's all these updates? Some will just have images, but if you have video, you can sell to them there. You can let them know what's going on. It's a great tool to use. Your news feed. This is where 60-second videos are going to come into play. Because that same 60-second video, you can be able to use it on Instagram. You can be able to use it on Facebook. Now, you're going to use different hashtags and those things here, but you're still creating that same piece of content that you can use on both platforms. My goal here is to help you not have to do more work. It's you can do something once and use it multiple times. Because time is the most valuable resource that we have, and we want to make sure we're maximizing what we have access to each and every day. For YouTube and Instagram TV, this is your longer videos. So if you're going to start doing lives, save them. Put them on these channels. Because people are going to be going there. And the reason why I say these are important, when it comes to social media channels, do you go back and look at someone's content from 6 months ago unless you're stalking them? Probably not. But on YouTube, what do people do? They're searching for something. And it doesn't matter if the video was a month ago, 5 years ago, people are still going to watch it. So that's why you want to make sure you're putting content in places where it's going to be found. So some content is going to be in the now, some is going to be for later. So you want to make sure that you're building up that library. It's extremely important. And ultimately, you want to transcribe them. How many of you have a blog? So here's something that you can easily do. Instead of looking at starting up your own blog and then trying to get traffic there, how many of you have ever used medium.com? A couple people. Write this one down. This is a highly trafficked website. So what you can do is your longer videos, even your shorter ones, you can transcribe them and turn it into a blog post and put it on medium.com. So it's another way of you getting traffic because medium.com posts can rank in Google. So this is why it's thinking ahead of how can you take that same piece of information and use it over and over and over again. So I'm going to give you a couple tools that are going to help you in this process. Answerthepublic.com. Has anyone ever heard of this website before? So this website here, it's designed to give you all of the long tail type searches that take place on Google. So let's say if you were to type in, say, restaurants, it's going to give you different terms. And it's going to give you something that looks like this. I know you can't read it, but it's going to give you like the who, the what, and the common types of questions that are there. So if you're kind of curious about, I'm not sure what type of content to create, type in a keyword related to your business on the site, and it's going to give you a ton of things that you can now create content around. And the best thing is, these are things that people are actually searching for right now. And what that means is, you're creating content based on what people are looking for. And that's what I want you to be thinking about. Create content that people are thinking of and looking for versus, I think this is a great idea. Not necessarily the way to do it. It might sound great, but it's much better to create content that people want. Yes. It's important. Descript.com. This is a great tool that allows you some really cool things from editing audio to you name it. But the biggest one is transcription. And you can get a lot of transcription done for just their basic membership, which is not very much. It's like $10, $15 a month. Because normally, if you're paying for transcription of things, you're having to use a couple other sites out there, and you're paying by minute. But this is a much more economical way for you to transcribe your videos and be able to use them. And also because you can be able to edit the audio and ultimately create a podcast, which leads me to anchor.fm. So with your videos, especially your longer ones, if you go into it with the mindset of, I'm going to record this in a way that I can be able to turn it into a podcast, guess what you can be able to do? You can leverage this platform to now have a podcast. So instead of going out there and creating another bit of work for you to do, you can now take that same information that you're already doing, the same video, pull the audio from it, and be able to post it here, and now you have a podcast, which means that you're going to be found on more platforms, such as iHeartRadio, you're going to be found on Apple, on Google. I mean, the list goes on and on, all the places where podcasts are listed at. Is that helpful? Okay, there's a couple people. I guess I'll go home now. But it's really important that we get ourselves out there. But there's one more thing here. You have to take action. Who here is committed to taking action and creating the content they need to grow their business? I'm not convinced. Who here is committed to creating content to grow their business? That's more like it. Because if you don't create content, it doesn't matter how great you are in your business, no one is going to know who the heck you are. And you don't want to be that guy or work girl or whatever. You want to be the expert, and the only way to do that is to create content so people see you and know you, that you know your blank. Because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's it. So you want to connect with me on my email or Instagram.